the devil came, and the forbidden fruit that's the forbidden fruit. And the devil convinced Eve to step out on her husband. That was the cheat. That was her taking a bite of the forbidden fruit on her husband. So when the devil convinced her to step out on her husband, Adam saw this and was like, what the fuck, Eve? And Eve was like, nah, you gotta do it. It feels so good. This is where we get homosexuality, because me telling you this as my interpretation, I can almost imagine how many fucking Christians are holding their phone just, you stupid, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to say it, but basically Adam had gay sex, and that was his sin, and infidelity was Eve's sin, and she had a baby by the devil. I'm sorry if no one likes to hear this, but this is my interpretation.
This has to be one of the wildest personal interpretations of the Bible I've ever heard, but I'll share it after this one, then we'll circle back. You know, I'm sure you've heard a lot of different personal interpretations of the Bible out there. One recent example is a pastor who, citing King David's example, taken a second wife.
Do we really believe that Paul, in one verse, is just disqualifying all the patriarchs who are prophets and elders from being prophets and elders anymore? They're now disqualified. Absolutely not. It's not what Paul is doing. That's ridiculous. How could we possibly? If Abraham resurrected, David resurrected, and came to preach at your church, you really believe he's not allowed because he has more than one wife? That's insane. Literally, it's insane. They wrote the scriptures we preach, and they wouldn't be allowed to preach those very scriptures that they wrote. That's obnoxious. Are you listening? Moses had more than one wife. Wrote 5 books of the Bible. We won't let him preach, though. That makes no sense. David wrote the Psalms. He even writes scriptures with commands and things to do. We wouldn't let him preach those things, though. He's not allowed. That doesn't make any sense.
But out of all the ones I've listened to so far, this has to be one of the wildest. Then I'll follow it up with a clip of a priest explaining what happened to Adam and Eve, so that we have a proper understanding, especially if anyone out there who might have their own personal interpretations. Listen to this.
I have my own interpretation of the Bible, specifically Genesis, because although I have never read the full Bible, but I have read Genesis quite a few times. Let me tell you my interpretation of what happened with Adam and Eve. All right, so Adam and Eve were in the garden, right? God made Adam, and then he gave Eve. They was in there living a good life, okay? Now, we do know that the devil exists, because in order to believe in God, you must believe in the devil. In order to believe in good, you must believe there's a bad, okay? So with that being said, I don't believe in possession, if that makes sense. I don't believe that the devil went inside of a snake and made the snake talk. There's no talking snakes. You'll never find a talking snake. So what I took that to mean is that the devil showed up with his dick out. That's the snake, the dick. The devil came, and the forbidden fruit that's the forbidden fruit. And the devil convinced Eve to step out on her husband. That was the cheat. That was her taking a bite of the forbidden fruit on her husband. So when the devil convinced her to step out on her husband, Adam saw this and was like, what the fuck, Eve? And Eve was like, nah, you gotta do it. It feels so good. This is where we get homosexuality, because I 100% don't believe this homosexuality started in the 70s and the 80s or in the 1800s. I believe it has always fucking been here, and it's been here because Adam took a bite of the forbidden fruit too. I don't know if you're getting, but I hope you're getting. And God saw this and was like, what? Them referencing that the fact that they're naked, because you got to think about it. They never knew they were naked while they were in a garden, right? They never knew that they were naked. They never knew that that was wrong. But with that being said, they never procreated either. So it makes sense that they hold that innocence, right? It makes sense that the devil would have taught them what sex was. I don't know if you get what that means. Like, I feel like God created just Adam and Eve. He didn't expect us to be a whole bunch of He just wanted Adam and Eve. This was like his little, his little homies. Like, there's this special place. It's all yours. He literally says in the Bible, this is all yours. You can have everything here. Just don't be. That's like, I don't know if you're getting what I'm saying, but that's what made sense to me. And the devil came in and taught them what sex was and taught them what gay sex was. And that, because And that pissed God off, because now you know what it is to procreate. So now, and now when he kicked them out of the Garden of Eden, right? When God said, you have to leave this place, you can no longer be here, right? And then Eve left pregnant. We know that. Eve left the Garden of Eden pregnant, okay? And when Eve left, and I don't believe that she was pregnant with Adam's baby. I don't believe that she was pregnant with Adam's baby. I believe that she was pregnant with the devil's baby, aka Cain. Cain, when he came out, that's why he murdered his brother Abel, because he knew that Adam felt ashamed for allowing himself to sin. He was God's first creation. Adam felt ashamed for allowing himself to sin the way he did. And they got kicked out of paradise. So now they have this baby. And I'm pretty sure Adam did not treat this baby like it was his own. And I'm pretty sure Adam made sure Cain knew, yeah, you're not my kid. And that's why when Abel came along and Adam treated Abel like his own son, Cain did what he did. You get what I'm saying? I don't think I'm explaining it the best way I can. I explained it so good when I was drunk. But I feel like those two little stories, I feel like them telling us it was a snake and it was the evil and it was this, it was that, I feel like that was just their way of cleaning it up. All that shit is a bunch of metaphors, and I don't think you get it. And that, I think, is my main reason why I just can't read the Bible. Like, I never took time to read the Bible, because you're not giving me that cut and dry. I need it cut and dry. And then me telling you this as my interpretation, I can almost imagine how many fucking Christians are holding their phone just, you stupid, you know what I'm saying? Like, y'all get mad that I'm interpreting in this way, and I've always been taught that the Bible is up to interpretation. I know it tells you everything you need to know in the New Testament. But in the Old Testament, I believe that it is 100% up to interpretation. I'm about to piss a lot of people off, and I really don't care. I need y'all to understand that this is how I'm not falling for the propaganda that there was an actual talking snake. And then these people are like, my homeboy and my homegirl, they're like, no, the snake didn't talk. It was the devil talking through the snake. I don't believe in possession. I'm sorry. If that was the case, then everybody who's ever been possessed by the devil never did the crimes that they did. Does that make sense? Like, no. I believe that the devil came in his form, in the form of the human, just like man, and he had the snake, and he convinced Eve, this is what sex is. This is what your forbidden fruit is. This feels good, right? This feels good, right? Yeah, this is it. This is it. And that is why women go through pain during birth, because we weren't meant to do that. We weren't meant to do that. And then Eve had sex with the devil. And then, my homegirl kept trying to convince me that Adam was not the problem. We can't blame Adam. We have to blame Eve. I don't blame Eve. I don't blame Adam. I blame both of them. Joint custody. They both get blamed, because at the end of the day, Eve should have listened to her husband and not with the shit that God told him not to with. And I think Adam should have led his wife away from evil and told her, no, you're not supposed to do this. And I feel like Adam fell at fault, because when he partaked in the fruit, he knew better. God told him not to do that. You get what I'm saying? I feel like the Christians just kind of like whitewashed they just kind of washed up the Bible, so it kind of plays into their narrative of like homosexuality's never been a thing. But you get me, right? But like, you get me though, right? Like, how the is it never been a thing, but it's here, and it's been here. Like, I don't want to say it, but basically Adam had gay sex, and that was his sin, and infidelity was Eve's sin. And she had a baby by the devil. I'm sorry if no one likes to hear this, but this is my interpretation.
So, if you still have a little bit of time, please listen to this clip of Father Iannuzzi on Adam and Eve. It's a little bit long, but I'm sure you're going to learn a lot from this one.
In the beginning, God made Adam and Eve, and his image was placed in Adam and Eve, as well as his likeness. And the divine will of the Trinity impacted both man and woman's body and soul. This is known as a psychosomatic communication. For in preserving the souls of Adam and Eve's original qualities and powers, the divine will maintained God's image in his soul. My will preserves the soul in its origin and does not allow it to be displaced from its point of origin, which is God. My will maintains intact the divine image in the depths of the soul's being, which is enclosed in its intellect, memory, and will. And the same divine will of God that impacted Adam and Eve's soul penetrated and enveloped their bodies with a garment of light, uncreated light, that preserved the very image in their soul and body. You see, the image of God is distinct from the likeness inasmuch as the image is the capacity of the intellect, memory, and will of the human being to reflect God, to act with God, to do divine acts that God performs in and through their intellect, memory, and will. The likeness is not just the capacity, but it is also the actuality. So it is one thing to be able to do something, that's image or potentiality. It's another thing to actually do it. And that is not just image and potentiality, but it's likeness and actuality. So when Adam and Eve sinned, they didn't lose the image of God because the human soul's powers were detained, although latent, these potencies, capacities to live in God's will. Man never lost this potency. Rather, the actuality was suspended. Although Adam tried as best he could to perform divine acts, he failed and he wept. And on account of his efforts, God was pleased. But for 6,000 years, the likeness of God has not been fully restored to human nature. And what is that likeness? Again, the acting out of that which we are capable of performing or is latent in us. And that is divine act that only come by way of the actualization of the powers of the human soul that only God, the divine will, can bring about. So when Adam and Eve committed original sin, they impaired, enslaved, not just human nature, but all creation. All creation was affected by original sin. Now, some may think, okay, what about the angels and saints in heaven? How are they affected by original sin? They're part of creation. Remember, the church is one, even though it has three dimensions to it. We may say you have the church rejoicing in heaven, the church suffering in purgatory, and the church militant on earth. But let us never consider the church militant on earth as something separated, as some people unfortunately do, from the church's suffering and rejoicing. They're all one in God's eyes. They're all connected. And this is known in our creed as the communion of saints. We are all connected spiritually. And as Paul reminds us, what one member does affects all the other members. He's not talking about just on earth. This impacts all three dimensions of the mystical body of Christ. So when a soul on earth, for example, is suffering and an ancestor who has died and is in heaven is aware of that by the grace of God, that ancestor will intercede immediately on behalf of the soul on earth. And the same with the souls in purgatory. Do you know that oftentimes the prayers of the souls in purgatory are heard before the prayers of the saints in heaven because their supplications are more earnest. They long more than the souls in heaven to be fully united with God. And that longing, which surpasses the very pains of purgatory, elicits God's attention. So the souls in purgatory also can intercede for us while being expiated of their sins that may have been confessed but not fully atoned for on earth. So Adam and Eve's original sin is really the remote and ultimate cause of all the disorders, psychological, psychosomatic, that we experience on earth, and the cause of the slavery that creation's longing to be freed from, as St. Paul states in his letter to the Romans. As you all know, the evil that plagues our human existence began in Eden. And as I mentioned in the past, I mentioned again, the problem was not the apple in the tree, but the pear on the ground. So Adam ate the apple, and all of our teeth have been subject to cavities ever since. Now, long before the material order, along with our universe, came into being, God created the angels. And they, 2/3 of them, remained loyal and 1/3 fell, refusing to accept the fact that Christ would become not an angelic person, but a human person. So Lucifer, with a third, abandoned their places in heaven. They were defeated by Saint Michael, an inferior angel, And this is where the first disorder in all the universe occurred. Why do I say in all the universe when Satan was an immaterial being? Because according to the writings of some early church fathers and doctors, including Irenaeus, Papias, Justin Martyr, God gave Lucifer a vision that Christ, the second person of the Trinity, would become incarnate in Jesus Christ and would raise human nature above that of the angels. And this is testified to in Paul's letters as well as in the letter to the Hebrews. And God, before Lucifer rebelled, gave to him the material order, whereby Lucifer had dominion over the entire cosmos. When Lucifer rebelled, God in turn gave this dominion of the entire cosmos, guess to who? To Adam. And then when Adam and Eve sinned, then Jesus Christ himself took command by becoming incarnate. So I mention this because the disorder in the world today and the divisions that endure are the result of Lucifer having dominion over creation. He still has dominion over creation, but not entirely. This is found in Paul's letter to the Ephesians, where Paul calls Lucifer the prince of the powers of the air. So sometimes tempests, natural disasters, always related to sin, can be the direct cause of Satan. People fail to realize this truth. Whenever there's a natural disaster, why did God allow it? They don't think that sin empowers Satan, who creates these things. God has allowed from the beginning Satan to wield authority over the elements of this world and the universe. When Satan, he had complete authority before he fell. When he fell, his authority was diminished. Adam was now in charge. Adam had power over Lucifer and over the material order. Adam had more power than Lucifer in Eden. But when Satan duped Eve, who in turn duped Adam, Satan had his feast day. Because now all creation was sent to ruin. But Satan didn't know that Christ was going to use that incarnation that was revealed to Lucifer, and by means of this incarnation was to use it to undo the devil's work. And this began in Christ's lifetime, when little by little he undid the disorders caused by original sin, namely blindness, deafness, leprosy, natural disasters like tempests, heavy winds that Christ commanded to settle down and they obeyed him, or even the fish that Christ commanded to be netted that obeyed him. So Christ little by little was mastering that which was mastering man on account of sin. Christ was beginning to reorder the disorder brought about by original sin. Now, the spiritual influences of evil, curses that plague some people today, are remotely connected to original sin and Satan's power in the world and over the elements today. Much like a good spirit and a blessing attaches itself to a holy object known as a sacrament or a sacramental, so a bad spirit and a curse may be attached to an object, namely a talisman or an amulet. So there's a connection here, you see, between grace, following the will of God, and creation's freedom, enjoying the rightful claims of holiness, of freedom from sin, from disease, from disorder, from possession. The negative influence of a bad spirit may be transmitted to an object by the actual sin of one performing a curse. Okay, and this type of curse is a tangible sign of the will to do harm and is offered to Satan to be imprinted with his evil powers. And inasmuch as Satan apes God, he seeks to negate the sacraments that convey grace, made up of a tangible matter as well. So this is just a small example of how evil through Satan seeks to counteract good that is wrought by God through his grace, in particular the sacraments. So whether we like it or not, The plagues that are affecting us today in the world today are the result remotely of original sin and Satan's work in the world. No matter how much we try to explain it in terms of environment, poor parenting, poor teaching, it all goes back to original sin. Now, on this concept of evil in the world, we must never fear or lose hope. One that I will now refer to and quote from Saint Faustina Kowalska. Basically reminds us that people don't go to hell without realizing it. People never go to hell against their own will. Now, Saint Faustina states in her diary, entry 741, I, Sister Faustina Kowalska, by the order of God, have visited the abysses of hell so that I might tell souls about it and testify to its existence. The devils were full of hatred for me, but they had to obey me at the command of God. What I have written is but a pale shadow of the things I saw. But I noticed one thing, that most of the souls there are those who disbelieved that there is a hell. So Satan seeks to sow disorder in the world slowly, without us realizing it, without us even believing that hell exists. And what is shocking in St. Faustina's entry just quoted is that from her experience, the majority of souls in hell are there without having believed the existence of hell. Imagine that. How can this be possible? This means that they did not realize that they were going to hell while they were alive. And this is how Satan leads souls away from God's divine will little by little and ultimately away from God's grace. God forbid a soul should die without having repented of its sins, because even if it commits the gravest sins on earth imaginable, it can always be forgiven and be saved even up to its last breath. But this is how Satan leads us and the world astray by reminding us that there is no hell, which is a lie, and which the world tells us, and that there are no consequences for our actions because we are all victims of society. There's no responsibility for our moral behavior because we have an excuse. The world is to be blamed for it. The government is to be blamed for it. Our parents are to be blamed for it. Our schools are to be blamed for it. The bad court systems and judges are to be blamed for it, but we are innocent. And this is Satan's lie. You see, morality is never influenced by the traumas we experience in life. Whether we're raised by abusive parents or an abusive government structure, morality is not influenced by that. But psychology is, and sometimes biology is. Let's take, for example, Bernadette of Lourdes. Here we have a saint born in very poor, impoverished surroundings, very little food on the table, very bad hygiene, and she was coughing and got TB, tuberculosis, possibly from her home, where there was mildew on the walls all the time. And her sister, and you won't find this in many hagiographical books, was a 180-degree personality in relation to Bernadette. Bernadette was a saint, her sister was not. She was a little devil. So how can one explain two sisters growing up in the same home under the same parents, taking two different paths? And this is not just the case with Bernadette, it's the case with other saints, right? But I just use Bernadette as one small example because we have a free will and we can freely choose to respond to external pressure or traumas in different ways. Certainly we have, by God, different proclivities and natural predispositions that incline us more or less to respond to certain external injustices or traumas or influences. So a person may be more sensitive to one issue than another person based on their predispositions that God gives them. Some people are just naturally sensitive by nature. A sharp word will set them off. So other people are very thick-skinned by nature, and you can scream in their face and it won't bother them till you scream 10 times. The little flower once said, some people are so gentle, you have to take them by the tip of their wings, and others are so rough that you have to take them by the scruff of their collar when correcting them. So considering all that, morality is not, or I should say morality does not change because of the traumas one experiences. In other words, God's law of doing good and avoiding evil does not undergo changes because of certain external influences that affect our psyche or our biology. When I speak of biology, I'm talking about things that can be inherited by birth. Let's say a parent abuses a chemical substance. Well, that chemical substance will invariably alter the genes of the child. This has been proven. And that child will have to grow up with a certain genetical anomaly. And there could be other cases like this, where they're called genetic markers in biology, where doctors have found that certain traumas or even abuses of the parent or a grandparent can be transmitted biologically, not morally, to the offspring. Now, what does God do with that? Why does God permit it? Because a person can use that, like Margaret of Costello, right, who was born with a physical deformity, and yet she became a saint in a convent. God can use physical imperfections, physical defects, as well as psychological defects. And these don't necessarily provide an obstacle to the work of his grace in a soul. Morality can avail itself of both, as long as the human free will is willing to avail itself of both, like Bernadette did in those poor surroundings of hers, and her sister didn't do. So what is my point here? Hell is a place where people choose to go to by their choices in life, by the way their morality responds to the traumas imposed upon them and the injustices that are thwarted upon them. We all in life will experience injustice, and we will all suffer traumas, including Christ and Mary, beginning with Christ and Mary. In the spiritual order of grace, of course, they were innocent and they endured tremendous injustices. But what did they do? Mary tells us in the Blessed Virgin Mary book, in the Kingdom of the Divine Will, that she used these injustices, these hatreds and venomous curses thrust upon her and her son to become even holier in their human natures, like when she was forced to flee to Egypt, and when she was forced to see her son be brutally tortured and crucified and so forth.
So that is all for this time, and I just want to thank every one of you for your continuous support and for taking a little bit of your time to be here every time I share something. Some don't like how I share this information and others just hate the videos, so I truly want to thank all of you who keep showing up. Thank you so much for your kind words and continuous support, and until the next time, thanks again for watching and may God bless you.